Tonight, a Detroit police sergeant facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit stemming from an arrest, and it's hardly his first brush with controversy. We first told you about this controversial arrest back in December. Well, tonight, 7 investigator Ross Jones revealing the troubling conduct that came first: domestic abuse, drunk driving, and a last chance from Detroit police.
I think this speaks to a much broader and bigger issue. It's the city of Detroit and the culture that they're cultivating.
Attorney Brandon McNeil says Detroit police enabled the wrongful arrest of his client by not taking action against a troubled officer years earlier. Sergeant Samuel Pianessa has been with DPD for 23 years and was a subject of a 7 Action News investigation last year over the arrest of Sandra Wilson.
I can tell you're lying. We know for a fact you're lying.
No, you don't know for a fact nothing because I'm not lying.
Wilson was accused of stealing a credit card she held onto for 15 seconds. It was left behind at this gas station in Detroit, right there on the counter. Sandra's crime, DPD would allege, was handing it to this woman in the pink pants, who, Sandra says, claimed it was hers. But police say the card belonged to someone else in the store that night, and while they never caught the woman who used it and had no evidence Sandra even knew her, they accused Sandra of being involved on the department's social media pages. After she walked into Detroit's 7th Precinct trying to clear her name, Sergeant Pianessa arrested her.
Cuffs?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess this is what you've...
No, because this is what y'all want to do to me.
Sandra was charged with 2 felonies, spent 3 days in jail, and lost her job. A Wayne County judge later dismissed all the charges against her, scolding police and prosecutors.
Absurd and ridiculous and wrong. And this was not a thorough investigation.
While DPD maintains even today that Sandra's arrest was proper, attorney Brandon McNeil is now suing the department on her behalf and says it's clear Sergeant Pianessa shouldn't have been in a position to arrest her in the first place.
5 minutes later, we met up at Greenfield and Fanco. He turned him over to me.
Pianessa has been a sergeant for the last 10 years, and his time on the force has hardly been without controversy. While at DPD, records show he's caused at least 2 vehicle accidents, the first in 2006 when he was drunk, more than 2.5 times the legal limit. He was suspended for 30 days. The second came in 2018 when Pianessa crashed a department vehicle, then left the scene. He would later say a dog jumped in front of his car, but a witness to the crash said there was no dog. Because Pianessa left the scene before a supervisor arrived and never got tested for drugs or alcohol, DPD could not determine with absolute certainty if he was under the influence. He was suspended for 3 days. And as an officer on the street, Pianessa has been accused dozens of times of misconduct, hit with 61 citizen complaints. They run the gamut from excessive force to improper searches.
61 citizen complaints is an outrageous number for someone who is a sergeant, someone who is supposed to be supervising other officers.
And in 2020, DPD nearly fired Sergeant Pianessa after he was arrested and accused by his girlfriend, who was also a Detroit police officer, of assault.
In police interviews, she said she was woken up in the early hours of November 2018 by Pianessa, who was screaming and repeatedly calling her the N-word. She said she ran upstairs, locking herself in a bedroom, but Pianessa followed her, continued screaming the N-word, then kicked in the bedroom door. She said he assaulted her, grabbing her by the back of her neck and pulling her backwards. She fled. A DPD investigation sustained the allegations against Pianessa.
He's really crossed the line when you put your hands on a woman.
Kenneth Reed is the spokesman for the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality.
Should there be room in the Detroit Police Department for officers that have been found to use the N-word?
That's a character flaw. If you're doing this to your woman, what are you doing out there when you're out here in these streets in the city of Detroit?
Pianessa was charged by the Wayne County prosecutor with domestic violence, but later pled no contest to destruction of property. He was sentenced to 9 months probation.
There's no excuse for his continued employment after this.
DPD acknowledged it would normally fire an officer for what Pianessa did, but instead gave him this last chance agreement. Approved under former Chief James Craig in 2020, it said if Pianessa engaged in similar misconduct, he would be fired. He agreed to seek treatment for alcohol abuse and served a 20-day suspension.
And did Sergeant Pionessa actually serve the suspension? No. We have documentation showing he used his comp time in lieu of serving a suspension. That's not discipline. That's not leadership.
2 years after signing his last chance agreement, Sergeant Pionessa would arrest Sandra Wilson. Her lawsuit, filed in Wayne County Circuit Court, seeks $10 million.
All of those times that they turned a blind eye to Sergeant Pionessa's behavior, that ultimately led to Sandra Wilson's unlawful arrest, and possibly countless others.
Sergeant Pionessa declined to talk to me by phone, but did email a statement. It reads in part, "A half-decade ago, my life came to a crossroads. I was struggling with an addiction to alcohol. When I hit my rock bottom, I realized I could not stop drinking on my own. As a person and a police officer, I strive to be kind and have empathy for those who are struggling and need help. To all those struggling with addiction, there is hope and redemption in recovery." Detroit police also released a statement applauding Pionessa for confronting his alcoholism. They said, in part, "Sergeant Pionessa has had no violations resulting in discipline since 2018, and he has complied with all stipulations from his past cases. Unfortunately, Sergeant Pionessa's conduct predates the department's current disciplinary and risk management protocols, but his progress to date is promising." I'm Ross Jones, 7 Action News.